I'm a graduate student in anthropology at the University of California, Los Angeles. I'm interested in studying the digitization of a government bureaucracy in India. I'm interested in studying it from a material perspective. I'm trying to understand how the mediums of bureaucracy are changing in the digital era. And I'm also interested in how the people who work within the bureaucracy are accepting these changes and how they're responding to these changes within their work and their social relations. I'm located in the state of Karnataka, and my field site is in a rural district in Karnataka, and I'm located within a government office. I'm talking to bureaucrats, and I'm also talking to other kinds of people who interact with the bureaucracy, the technologists, the consultants, and many other people who come in contact with the bureaucracy in this moment of digitization. Yeah, so there's as you know, the bureaucracy is a very sort of materialized space. A lot of the work that bureaucracies do happen through material forms, right? So in the past we had a lot of paper and a lot of other kinds of tools and techniques that bureaucrats used. So I'm looking at the transformation of these existing mediums, especially the document, records, reports, other kinds of documentation that bureaucracies do. I'm looking at the digitization of these records, and I'm trying to understand what kind of digital tools, what kind of digital mediums emerge as these things change. It's not so much that the government itself is doing this digitization. A lot of the digitization is being outsourced in a way to private organizations, and to private organizations that involve both small and big companies. But it's being done under the supervision and the kind of monitoring of government officials. There are different kinds of digital labor, I would say, that is part of this process, and that digital labor is really something very interesting to look at, and especially in its relationship with existing forms of labor within the bureaucracy. Yeah, I would say that there's definitely a new class of labor that's emerging within the formal structures of bureaucracy, and this labor is contractual, is based on what I'm looking at in a certain way, a certain kind of precarious arrangement. It's not as well paid as a formal engagement with the bureaucracy. It's also dependent on other kinds of connections that these people have within the localized social structure of the bureaucracy. But given how precarious labor in general is, informal labor in India, this kind of engagement through this digitization is really also creating opportunities for people outside the bureaucracy. In the past, they were sort of limited and specific ways in which knowledge produced from one place was shared with the other, and it usually took the form of written documents, but also kind of oral communication. Now I see that there seems to be multiple ways of sharing this kind of knowledge and information that's being generated. So you have email, and you have other web-based applications, but increasingly you also have a lot of mobile-based communication. So you have apps, you have conference calling devices, you have WhatsApp being heavily used by government officials to communicate among themselves and also with people outside the office. You have other kinds of SMS and text-based programs that are used. So I think there's a versatile group of technologies and techniques that are used to communicate this kind of digital form of data that's emerging. One of the features of this data that's being produced and proliferating really within these spaces is that it's highly mobile, right? So this idea that what's happening in one location can be made visible at a different scale of the state is very much the ambition of this moment, right? So it's definitely the case that a lot of local offices in some ways are being integrated um, within larger organizational forms, and there's a certain kind of ability of people, of officials and supervisors from a distance to understand what's happening in the local space. And the kind of flip side of that is that it's happening through a certain limited set of indicators, right? So you don't get a very deep sense of what's going on within a local office, but you get a sense in a representational form, and one has to see what the effects of that are, right? So if in the past an official from, say, the district had to come down to a local level to see what's going on and maybe develop a deep sense of what's happening, now it's very much the case that they would not make that journey, instead depend on certain kinds of indicators and categories of data to tell them that story. I can see both the possibilities, the potentialities of this technology, given its convenience and its efficiency, and also the anxiety that's being produced, right? So there's, I would say, a certain kind of fear that things are going under the radar, that things are happening which are outside the control of higher level bureaucrats. And I think interestingly, the response to that is to produce more technology, right? So it isn't the case that they question the technology. I think the case is that they begin to feel that the technology is inadequate to do what was being done in the past. So the answer to that is let's create more mechanisms. I'm very interested in studying the way the bureaucracy is getting digitized, and I would like, in some sense, to go back to some original tenets of why a bureaucracy should exist at all, right? Why should a public bureaucracy exist? And I think we've sort of lost sight of that in our desire to see some of the problems with bureaucracy disappear. We in some ways have forgotten what the purpose of an organizational form like this within a public sphere is, right? So I guess I would want to, in my work and in my thinking, try and view this moment of digitization from the lens of what the ethical responsibility, what the ethical functions of a public bureaucracy are in a country like India.